What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're going to be going over J. Warner Wallace and maybe it's recent, I'm not sure. It's a talk he had where he was asked the question of how do we help unbelievers or non-believers that don't trust the New Testament? I think it's a fair question to ask, and I'm not exactly expecting J. Warner Wallace to represent us in the best light, considering what we've experienced with J. Warner Wallace in the past. So if y'all want to know how a shitty former detective describes atheists and their hang-ups with the New Testament, then please stay tuned.
What can we do to help someone who has a liberal theology that doesn't believe in the authority of Scripture?
All right, so to answer this guy's question, an actual atheist talking about this kind of thing, what I would need is some kind of verifiable proof that you know who wrote the Gospels or know who wrote a majority of the New Testament other than Paul. We know Paul wrote a good number of the books in the New Testament, but I'm guessing when you're referencing the New Testament, you're really just talking about maybe the Gospels. That's generally what's being discussed. So you would need to establish who wrote the Gospels. You would also need to combat the years upon years of scholarship that show that all of the Gospels are interdependent, meaning that they depend on each other for their content. Specifically, Mark being written first and depending on Paul, and then Matthew being written second and depending on Mark, and then Luke depends on both Matthew and Mark, and then John uses all three of those Gospels. You would have to show me how they're not interdependent, and that they are indeed independent accounts of Jesus. I mean, that would take a lot of evidence to overcome the scholarship, but it can be done if you want to do the work, although I don't think that represents reality, because all the evidence that we have had so far shows us that the Gospels are anonymous accounts that are not seeking to write history, but they are trying to write theology for this new Christian religion. I don't know if this person is asking how do we help them trust the New Testament, or what's the best course of action when somebody doesn't trust the New Testament. And my guess is that it's probably the latter. And if you're a Christian and you find yourself in this type of position, just simply don't use the New Testament, because the New Testament's not going to prove anything to us. And in fact, the Bible in general is not going to prove anything to us. If you think atheists don't know the Bible, then you need to spend some time talking to atheists.
Well, so to ask the question, you always got to ask good questions. Why? So if someone comes with an issue, I want to ask, well, and you probably know Greg Koukl's work.
Yes.
Okay, so Greg Koukl's done some good friend of mine. He wrote a book called Tactics. I feel like I should get a commission on every one of those ones he sells, because I think I sell more books than Greg does for him. But his book Tactics is helpful because it talks about asking three important questions. What do you mean by that? Why do you think that's true? And have you ever considered this alternative? That's usually some form of the third question. So the first question I'm going to ask is, well, why would you think this is not reliable to begin with? Why would you think that this, I'm with you. I never thought it was reliable. No.
I don't know. I seriously doubt that J. Warner Wallace ever doubted the reliability of the New Testament, but let's just give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he did. Now, why don't I consider the New Testament to be reliable? Well, considering that we don't have any authentic authors for either the Gospels or the rest of the New Testament, the only real author that we know about is Paul, and even he doesn't really talk about any kind of historical information. He only talks about Christian teachings and everything like that. You get a lot of claims out of the New Testament when you take them individually, to take the books of the New Testament individually. With the Gospels, I definitely don't trust them because we don't know what the original Gospels were. The earliest manuscripts that we have for the Gospels start in the 3rd century. We don't know anything prior to that. That's 200 years of edits that we have no idea about what edits were made. Through textual analysis, we have been able to determine some of the edits, but these are major things. These are things that persisted in later editions of the Bible that we were able to analyze and compare and figure out, oh, hey, this was inserted at some point, and not all the manuscripts that we have this part. A good example of this would be the ending of Mark. The original ending of Mark, we don't know what that was. It could have ended at verse 8. It could have, or it could have continued. It could have been replaced. But currently, as it stands, there are two endings that are tacked on to Mark. There's a shorter ending and then a longer ending. And we don't know if either of them were original to it, but we have found manuscripts where they don't even have it, where it stops at verse 8. So, that's one really good example. If you want another example, you go to the Gospel of John. That whole part where Jesus comes upon Mary Magdalene, where she's about to be stoned by a crowd, and Jesus draws a line in the sand. He's like, "Hey, the first one of you sons of bitches that hadn't done no sins, step forward and pelt her with the rock." Like that whole story was inserted into John. It's not original to that gospel. It was inserted by a later Christian looking to push some theological position. I guess that you shouldn't stone prostitutes. I don't know. But these are just two of the major things that we can tell from later editions of the Bible, that these edits happened prior to that iron wall that sits there at the 3rd century. So why don't we trust the New Testament, or why don't we trust the Gospels? Because they have a sordid past. We don't know who wrote them. We don't know what their sources are. These are the reasons why we don't consider them to be all that trustworthy or to give us any kind of historical information.
We didn't talk about this tonight, but how I tested the scripture was under the 4 criteria we use with eyewitnesses in trial. Were you really there to see what you said you saw? Can you be corroborated in some way? Have you changed your story over time? And do you have some bias or motive that would cause you to lie to me?
Well, I kind of feel like the 4 things that he presented automatically assume that they are eyewitness accounts. I mean, they're not even written like eyewitness accounts. There's nothing in the Gospels that scream eyewitness to me other than, Papias in the 2nd century saying that they were eyewitness accounts and then attributing names to them, which Papias has his problems in his own regard. That's why I don't trust him. But the fact that these are not eyewitness accounts means that you can't treat them like eyewitness accounts. And if he's a good apologist, which I'm guessing J. Warner Wallace fancies him a pretty good one, he should know all of this. He should know the scholarship against him, and it's massive. So he's holding on to this very fundamentalist type of view of the Gospels.
That's the criteria that we offer jurors to examine when we're talking about eyewitness testimony. So I simply said, well, if I apply this to the Gospels, could they pass? Now, we didn't talk about that tonight.
Well, no, they couldn't. As I've already laid out extensively in this video, they definitely couldn't pass that because we don't know who in the fuck wrote the Gospels.
But that's really how, there's a bunch of stuff I had to jump through in order to become a Christian. And the first thing I had to know is, why would I trust that the scriptures are telling me anything true about Jesus? Look, let's put it this way. Go with me on a thought experiment. If the Gospels simply reported Jesus as an ancient sage who preached, that's it. No miracle working, no born of a virgin, didn't die on a cross and resurrected, none of the miracle stuff was in there. If all it was that he was a preacher in the 1st century, he would be the most well-documented historical preacher in the history of preachers. There wouldn't be a single person who would doubt the historicity of Jesus. But you add the miracles, and now everyone's like, can't trust that stuff. That speaks to the presuppositional bias of naturalism.
If you notice, the entire time that I've been speaking in response to J. Warner Wallace, I have not said one thing about miracles. I have not appealed to any argument against miracles or anything like that. So it's kind of funny how he's now saying that, the only reason why these people don't trust the Gospels or trust the New Testament is because of miracles. No. Also, to suggest that Jesus would be the most well-documented preacher in the 1st century, I don't think that you're really acknowledging all of the evidence against you. Because the only independent evidence that we have of Jesus is through Paul, and Paul only speaks about a celestial version of Jesus. So in reality, as far as the historical Jesus goes, we have literally no evidence out there about him. Now, of course, there are some scholars and some apologists that will speculate about the Gospels and what we can know to be true about the historical Jesus from the Gospel. And in one sense, I do agree that if Jesus was a historical person, the Gospels may have some historical information about him. But the problem with that is that the Gospels relay so much incorrect information in their respective works that you cannot know what is historical and what is bullshit. So you're left with speculating about what is historical in the Gospels. And that doesn't get you anywhere. Speculation does not prove something to be true. So Jesus being the most well-documented preacher in the first century? I don't think so. Whenever I tend to argue either against the Gospels, against the resurrection, or against Jesus as a historical figure, I typically don't just flat out say, miracles can't happen, therefore all this is bullshit and I don't believe it. I typically have much deeper reasons for not believing in that bullshit. There are various reasons, like the fact that they're anonymous works, the fact that they don't list any of their sources, the fact that the only source they ever really cite are the scriptures. How in the world, in the various gospels, do you get somebody recording what happened to Jesus in private? How does that fucking work? I don't know. Maybe God penned it with his lightning dick. Who knows? That's right, honey. It does seem legit. God and his lightning dick just wagging it about, writing shit down.
That we are biased against the miracles. Everything else, we're like, hey, that's solid. Put the miracle in, oh, no, can't trust any of it. So that really is more about our bias than it is anything else.
I don't trust miracles. I should specify this at this point. I don't take miracles to be a true representation of reality. Whenever I talk about the Gospels or anything like that, I don't consider the miracles to be in serious discussion. This is because miracles, or verifying a miracle rather, would require showing a suspension of the natural order of reality. That is a really tough thing to prove, because you would have to prove that it's not in the natural order of reality for that event to happen. And like I said, really tough to prove that. But if you could conceivably prove that particular thing, then you would prove the supernatural, or you would prove at least that the concept of miracles is a very probable thing to happen. But because you can't do that, that means that miracles are not proven. The supernatural has not been proven to exist. So I don't take miracle claims seriously. I don't take the miracle claims of the gospel seriously. But that doesn't mean that I have to throw out the entire gospels. It's totally reasonable for you to just focus on, like, I guess the more historical aspects of the gospels. Although, harkening back to what I just said a few minutes ago, it's hard to determine in the gospels what's historical and what's bullshit. So you'd have a tough time there, but I don't think that miracles are the linchpin that J. Warner Wallace is portraying them to be.
But I would say to all of you, I didn't have anyone I could read when I became a Christian. I didn't know what apologetics was, so I didn't know who even the authors would be. So I started digging through church history, church fathers, early first century stuff, the stuff I've been writing about in the next book. And I would suggest to you is don't trust me for this. Do not trust me and do not trust Craig for it. We can guide you. We can show you what we did. That's what we try to do. We want to equip you, the saints, for the work of ministry. But to be equipped, you have to be knowledgeable.
I agree. Don't trust J. Warner Wallace. Look up the information for yourselves. Read the counter scholarship to his position. Because just like with my mythicism, he's holding a fringe position, except his fringe position has no good evidence to support it, while my mythicism does have good evidence to support it. That's the big difference here. He is ignoring scholarship. He's ignoring all of the scholars and all of the evidence against his position. And he's doing it because of faith. So yes, do not trust him.
And so what we want is we want to point you in the right direction. And then all that time you've been spending wondering whether or not, and reading about whether or not Dak Prescott's going to get back in the saddle, spend that studying Scripture. Because all this is about us reprioritizing the stuff that we used to think was important, and we waste so much.
He's basically done with his informational portion of the video here. I would really love to know what everybody thinks about what J. Warner Wallace has said. Do you just disregard the New Testament because of the miracles? I feel like it's a bit unreasonable to disregard the entirety of the New Testament because of miracles. There are plenty of better reasons to disregard the information in the New Testament than miracles. But also, having a predisposition to reality should never be considered like a hang-up or like a negative attribute. I am predispositioned to what is true about reality. And if something's not true about reality, I'm not going to use it as evidence for what's true about reality. J. Warner Wallace is trying to present to you this predisposition to naturalism, but what he's really complaining about here is the fact that people don't accept things that haven't been proven to be true, like miracles. Miracles are not proven to actually happen, just like the supernatural has not been proven to actually exist. So there's no reason to believe those things are true facts about reality. But of course, he just wants to hand wave it away as, oh, they're just predisposed to naturalism. Yes, I'm predisposed to reality. Thank you, J. Warner Wallace. But for everybody else out there, please leave me your comments and thoughts down there in the comment section. I'd really love to know what you think about J. Warner Wallace and his arguments or claims in this video. Let me know down below. And hey, while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.